Hello there, yes. Well, 'tis Saturday. 'Tis was, indeedy, yes. Anyway, today, good grief. One of the things about the Trumpian New World Order, or whatever the latest iteration of that is this particular morning or afternoon, or whenever you're watching this. After all, it will have changed since this morning or this afternoon, depending on when you're watching this. But yeah, one of the things about that, of course, is seeing a lot of right-wing commentators who would otherwise be cheering a Trump presidency, isn't Doge great, having to squirm in and around the basic economics of it, which are, well, nonsensical, patently, and are fueled simply by money-grabbing oligarchs. Because, of course, most of the debate in the UK is formulated by a bunch of people centred in on around Tufton Street. They have dominated the British commentariat for 20 years now, and they show no signs of letting go. Even those groups that aren't actually based in Tufton Street with the IEA have enormously close ties with them. They might not physically be in Tufton Street, but they are basically tied to it umbilically, if you like. And a classic example of this is James Lesh, the famously mustachioed occasional young person. And he had an article in yesterday's Telegraph where he was blaming the Labour Party for just being appalling. Obviously, we know they're appalling, that's fine. But he doesn't apply the same rules, I do notice, and certainly he didn't apply the same rules to Liz Truss, other than Liz Truss didn't do it right. Oh, right, okay then, yeah, there was that idea, because of course the IEA had its fingers all over that particular debacle. But the thing about Matthew is he is basically paid to platform ideas that would never otherwise come in front of us. When I was growing up, we didn't have economists in front of us in the way that we do today as sensible voices. And if you look at his background, well, okay, he did get a master's at the LSE, but it wasn't in economics. He doesn't have a background in economics in real terms. He's about as much of an economist as I am, and certainly he's, unlike me, he's never actually worked in an actual job in the actual real world. Matthew has never been a cleaner or a bar worker or a child carer or a carer, or the list I could go on in terms of actual work. That's not what he's done. But, of course, the thing is that he is there simply to push a particular viewpoint and agenda. And I just want to highlight this, which is his pinned tweet on his Twitter sphere notice thing. From February, new graph, inflation has risen 80% since 2000. Yeah, we're all a lot poorer. By we, I mean ordinary people, Matthew. Obviously not you and your bosses. Highly regulated products like electricity, housing and childcare have had rapid price increases. And you can see here under the highly regulated red lines, all bad hiss, ooh, look. But competitive and innovative markets like cameras, clothing and toys have had price decreases. Now, on the surface, that looks very, very sensible and a sort of very compelling argument until you actually, well, do the classic thing that I do of stopping and thinking about it. Now, most of the things that he's complaining about here, which are highly regulated for good reason. I'll come back to electricity, but if you think about it, the insurance market realistically isn't highly regulated other than you are mandated to have it. Think car or house in a great deal of circumstances if you've got a mortgage. Okay, you might say, but it's still a free market, and yet it's gone up enormously. Reason? Well, ask the insurance business about that, if you like. They've had to make some big payouts. They don't want to. They're a profit-driven business. Oh, that's odd, isn't it? Yes. Think about childcare. This is perhaps the classic one here, because, yes, whilst that is a mandated thing by government, it's something that you do want to have regulated. Sorry, Matthew, but I don't think what we want is unregulated childcare in the UK. It's extremely dodgy. You know, it's the metaphorical equivalent of leaving your kid with the Catholic priest. You can see that you probably will be okay and you probably will get your child back at the end of the day. However, there are issues around it. Or indeed, let's think about some of these other stuff here, like rail transport. Now, rail transport, and okay, let's dive in with electricity. Rail transport and electricity is a free market. Do you remember Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady, the Grand Duchess of neoliberal thinking, introduced those two to the market? And yet there is no market because there can't be, to a certain extent, right? And what Matthew means by electricity isn't that these companies compete against each other, which nominally they do, but it's that government regulates the supply to a large extent, or to some extent, notwithstanding things like the Ukrainian war. So it's a very muddled picture. It isn't simply that the government boo-hiss regulates the electricity market, it's just in many ways we need to shift to a different form of energy production. Now, we could go for some really, really dirty energy production, but I'm sure that you can see that that might not be such a good idea in the long run. I guess Matthew is proposing that he'll be able to be rich enough to be able to afford his own oxygen cylinder, but I don't want to live there any more than I want to live there with deregulated childcare or indeed deregulated trains. Explain to me again exactly how that would work. It can't. It isn't a free market because free markets per se don't exist. But you can see these other things where the free market does have a freer hand, if you like. So, okay, toys, clothing, TVs, computers and cameras. Okay, great. But if you say to people in this country, would you like the government to step in and regulate housing or toys, you're going to get one definitive answer. And if people are asked, would you want for energy prices to be fixed and capped by the government, or would you like to pay an extra £5 a month for your new phone? I think people would go for the energy. All of these things that have gone up enormously have gone up when they directly, really enormously affect people. I'm sorry, but even people with children aren't worried about price inflation on toys, are they? And in terms of the market regulation of these things, how on earth are we going to get childcare opening up to world markets or our rail travel? It's farcical. So, in other words, it's just a whole bunch of squiggly lines on a bit of paper with some words on. It's nonsensical. But of course, Matthew will be the one who gets to sit down and explain exactly why Rachel Reeves is doing such a bad job and why we need to have that kind of tax cuts for the rich, because tax cuts for the rich, because tax cuts for the rich. Yes, the rich who also own all that land, which means that house prices go through the roof. But we won't talk about that because it's inconvenient. Yes. And, the whole mentality of these things, I think, meets its kind of real zenith or apogee in a good friend of the channel, James, who here is complaining that a whole bunch of people that are qualified in terms of professional body, a professional body that he can't join because he's not qualified and basically had problems on the course, that these people say one thing and he doesn't agree with them. Now, guess which of the two of those people, or groups of people, well, just person on one side and huge professional body on the other, will be invited to have a discussion about trans issues? You're right. Because, of course, one of the problems with having a deregulated media market is that it's simply dominated by the rich. Oh, just like real life then. Yes, indeed. And they were very, very, very keen on all that free speech that they have. Not to have some different viewpoint isn't going to happen. Or if it does happen, they do get uppity about it, because if you get to see Gary from Gary Economics and he seems like he's making sense, by God, the Daily Mail's going to go for him, aren't they? Ooh, yes, he's not really working class, No, not really, and he's just spouting rubbish. Let's ask Matthew about him, shall we? Do have a glorious Tiswazzy day. It had a special something on a Saturday, waking up and knowing you didn't have to go to work, but you could watch Tiswas. It kind of set you up for the day nicely. Do enjoy. Not Tiswas, obviously, because they've died now, haven't they? Most of them, a lot of them. Anyway, enjoy. Have a good one.